Welcome back to another episode. This week we'll be sharing with you a very candid conversation that I had on another podcast, on the Pull Up Podcast with Coach Tony. And actually my daughter Suzette joined in on the conversation as well. So this is the Final Four episode. How is your bracket? Are your teams still in the tournament? We're looking forward to a very competitive week this week as we crown a new champion in basketball. I was actually able to be a part of March Madness with Jackson State Tigers women's basketball as they took on UConn, who, as you know, is still a part of the Final Four now. So leave us some comments about how your brackets turned out. Do you even still fill out a bracket? I stopped doing brackets probably a couple of years back simply because it was taking the fun out of it for me. But my son filled out a bracket. He did pretty well. Started off kind of rough, but he's got 3 out of 4 teams left in the Final Four. So how did your bracket turn out? Well, enjoy this episode as we talk about life, sports, and medicine and the intersection of them, and also about this next level and the next generation of women sports, and especially women basketball. So hope you enjoy this episode.
Man, welcome back to the Pull Up Podcast Show. Your guy, the one and only Coach Tony. Tonight, make sure you do one thing for me. That's like the show, share the show, and more importantly, subscribe to the show. It's one of the hottest sports shows to hit the land, and we're glad to have you tonight on the Pull Up Podcast Show. Tonight, our guest hails from the world of the HBCU in the medical field, but we're going to mix sports and medicine and show you how that all plays out. He is an orthopedic surgeon. He's also a sports medicine specialist. He's a motivational speaker, kind of like myself. He's a motivational speaker. He's also a host of his own podcast called Time Out with the Sports Doctor. Ooh, man, tonight we're going to put them both together. He's a graduate of HBCU Xavier, New Orleans University. He's also a graduate of the Howard University Medical School. And then he's on staff at Jackson State University. And he's a member of the illustrious Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Spring out, my guy, Dr. Derrick Burgess. Man, cuz, what's good with you, baby?
Hey, what's going on?
And you know I gotta love you, man, because it's basketball night and one of the biggest basketball nights in the country on right now.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm on the sideline where I'm missing half of the game,
I know, ain't that funny? And I'm already in coach's mode, so I'm screaming at the broadcast right now, everything going up and down. So welcome to the Pull Up Podcast Show, man. I'm glad you take a moment out of your schedule to join us tonight, kind of educate the people a little bit as we talk about intersection of sports and medicine and all that. So, as we get started here, let's just tell everyone a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you come from, and so forth and so on.
Sure. As you mentioned, born and raised Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Left home when I graduated from high school, went to Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans. And then I went to DC for Howard University College of Medicine, and then did my surgery training there as well. For 10 years, I was there, and I did a year of fellowship. Fellowship is where you specialize after you graduate and you're a doctor. And then I was an orthopedic surgeon. I did an additional year of training where I only treated athletes and specialized in sports procedures, arthroscopic surgeries, ligament reconstruction, ACL ligaments. We all know about ACLs in basketball, soccer, football players. So I did that for a year. And now I'm 10 years into practice, and I am an assistant professor in orthopedic surgery, and also, as you mentioned, team physician for a lot of the local high schools, as well as the Jackson State University.
Oh man, let's go. Let's rewind this tape. Let's go way back into them young days before you got to this mountain real quick here. Back in high school, did you have the opportunity to play sports? Were you playing sports at that time?
Yeah, so I was a 3-sport athlete growing up. Sophomore year of high school, I decided to stick with track and football. But sports have always been a part of my life from the age of 7 or 8 growing up. And, growing up in our neighborhood, youth sports was always at my house every day. So football in the backyard.
You go get it in.
Basketball on the court. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I get a lot of times, I get a lot of questions to me. I get a lot of people now that I've moved away from the college sideline into the high school. Me and the AD, sometimes some of the parents go back and forth, as you just mentioned. What do you think is the appropriate number of sports as a kid is playing in high school? Because I gave my own opinion, and I thought exactly where your cutoff time was. I said, once you get to that sophomore year, in my personal opinion, you probably want to couple the sports that work great. Like I'm a basketball coach, love kids that play volleyball, love kids run track and field because the jumping and the running and the conditioning. But what are your thought processes on in terms of the number of sports? Do you have one or doesn't matter?
So I'll just keep it kind of in general. So early on, kids that are in youth sports, we usually encourage them to play multiple sports because plenty of studies have been shown to show that kids that are playing multiple sports tend to be better athletes. So one thing we're seeing now is single sport specialization, especially in basketball and in baseball, where kids are playing that same sport, and that's setting them up many times for the overuse injury. So cross training is important, as well as letting kids be kids. You know, we used to be out, as I mentioned, playing in the backyard, playing on the driveway every day. That's missing now. So as
Yeah.
kids tend to get older, and you might say that, okay, this kid's going to be a basketball player, this kid's going to be a volleyball player. Usually ninth to 10th grade is where we start to see the athletes specialize more so in one or maybe two sports, because you still have many athletes that have the ability to play two sports even in college. So
Oh yeah, that's good. Hey, Wise checking in tonight, baby. What's going on? And my girl Bella, thanks for checking in as we got my guy, Dr. Derrick Burgess, sitting in here with Coach Tony on the Pull Up Podcast show, talking about everything from sports injuries to medicine and how they intersect with one another. Now, when you're sitting there and you're playing ball and you're coming out of Muscle Shoals High School at that time, and you mentioned that by your sophomore year, you start to streamline it down and say, hey, here's the direction I'm going to go. When did medicine kind of come into play? Was it later on once you got to college, or did you kind of have that early love for medicine? How did that come about?
yeah, so almost the same time, about sophomore, junior year in high school, I decided, hey, I want to be a doctor. And at the same time, I was starting to realize that I'm probably not going to be a professional athlete. So junior, senior year, I wanted to start to focus more on academics. And I feel like that's a piece that's really missing many times with athletes, is the emphasis of academics in your overall career. And I talk to my athletes all the time to let them know at some point the ball's going to stop bouncing. You have to hang up the cleats, and what's next? So
Right.
at that point, I knew that I wanted to do medicine, and I started to get interest from Xavier. And, you know, I knew I wasn't going to, they didn't even have a football team. So playing college football was, being a professional as far as medicine was more important than continuing as an athlete, whether it be as a junior college or at a Division III that I also had offers at.
Yeah, and the crazy part about that is I talk about that with a lot of my athletes, and that's funny you mentioned that in terms of intersection side of the house. So that plan B of yours was an early plan B, and in other words, that plan B that was early plan B got switched around, and that plan B became the plan A, because we know that B would be there. You could probably had a great opportunity, play at a small school, go do some stuff like you said, but then down the road, it may have taken a little longer because you probably would have focused on that plan A a little bit longer on the sports side. I just talked to a couple of kids a few weeks ago, and I say, man, you're good. If you got that plan B that supersedes that plan A, then just go professional on that plan B. And then when you get back to your 10-year reunion, it's not how you got there. It's just as long as you arrive. Do
Absolutely.
you start to see that a lot now that you're in the high school setting where you're able to give those advisory and some of the young kids?
Sure. So I challenge my athletes daily. Many times I'll ask them, they come in to see me for a knee problem or a shoulder problem, and sure, we address that. But before we leave, I'm going to ask you about your grades. And most of the time, the first time it's going to catch you off guard, but I'm going to ask you about your grades. I'm going to ask you about your ACT or SAT score. And if you're an elite athlete, we're going to even have a discussion about the clearinghouse. Do you know what the clearinghouse is? Because if you haven't made a certain ACT or have a certain GPA, it doesn't matter if you're
Exactly.
a 5-star athlete or a 3-star athlete, you are going a certain route. You cannot go Division I if you cannot check those boxes. So
Correct.
I don't discourage kids to say, some people say, oh, you're not going to be a pro. You're not going to be able to play in college. I say, well, what after that? So let's just play this out. You're 18 now, and you're going to have a great career. You're going to even be LeBron James. You're going to play until you're 38. but what are your plans for the next 30 years of your life? You
Right.
know, I always ask them, how long are you going to play? Probably about 36, 37. Okay, so good. So what are you going to do after basketball? Or what are you
Right.
going to do after football? So I don't discourage them, but I also allow them to start thinking beyond the basketball court.
Well, that's good. And I think you just hit an important thing. And I think that, that's why I appreciate, and I talk to a lot of the college coaches, clinics, especially the younger coaches, because I get a lot of younger parents that want to blame the high school coaches based on whatever. And I sometimes ask them, do you understand the clearinghouse? And there are two separate clearinghouses. For those that watching the show tonight, you've got the NAIA clearinghouse, and then you have the NCAA clearinghouse. The NCAA clearinghouse takes care of Division I, Division II, because D3 doesn't need one. And then the NAIA has one because some of those schools can still offer scholarships. So, and it's very important that when you see that and you're in that seat that you are, I like the fact of the matter, if you're asking the kids about their grades, then you turn around and try to figure out where they are. Because I look at it sometimes and I said, you can either be good in multiple things or you can trim it down and be great in one. Do you see a lot of your athletes, once they graduate from high school or go on to college, some of the ones that listen to you come back and say, hey, man, thanks for that great advice?
Yeah, I mean, I have conversations with some of them, and especially I'm really close to some of my athletes. You don't necessarily want to be really close to your orthopedic surgeon, but
Right.
life happens, right? So if you have that opportunity, why not form a relationship? So I'll just name some of my athletes. They won't mind. Tremaine Crosby, Keon
Yep.
Howard. These are some athletes that you know of who I've formed really lifelong relationships through them coming to treatment. And they still feel confident enough in me now to reach out to me when they have something going on in their lives, or when they're in school and they have a question, or if you're away and you don't have the treatment you need, to really reach back and have, because there's a relationship there. And I really appreciate having that with my athletes.
Man, that's great. And checking in tonight is my homeboy who run the switchboard for us on Interlude Talk on Tuesday. My guy, the one and only Kevin Springer. Thanks for checking in. Make sure if you guys got a question for Dr. Derrick tonight, please put it in the box tonight so we can make sure we get to your questions this evening. But, Derrick, another thing is that don't take it lightly. And I know you talk about the athletes you talk to help out. I mean, talk a little bit about the guys at the next level, because you were working with quite a few of the athletes from the Pelicans and some from the New Orleans Saints as well. Talk a little bit about that on the professional side of the house, the attitudes and where they've gone and where you see some of those athletes as compared to the guys you're trying to get to that point.
Sure. I've been blessed to treat a lot of high level athletes. And truthfully, their professional mentality starts, you can tell a high school athlete that's going to be a great college player or a great professional player.
Yeah.
I've been blessed to be around great talent, both at Jackson State University, as well as in my training when I worked with the Cincinnati Bengals. But true players that treat it as a job, they take it very seriously. And that separates you, because talent will get you so far, but your work ethic has to meet your talent level at some point.
Exactly. That's funny that you said that. LeBron James has a brand new podcast he's out on, and he talks about that, the mentality and the difference between the kid that is trying to make it to that level and the kid that's trying to put himself in position to get to that level. It's the sacrifices. We talk about, him and all of his homeboys that played in Akron. Obviously LeBron was a breakout of the crew, and then he now got Rich Paul and all his guys on his side. And he said the difference that for him was back a few years ago when he broke into, as we say, the basketball world, all he knew about was basketball. But he came from that broken family. He came from that broken tree. And that was his way out. He didn't see going to the sock hops, or he didn't see going to the local dances or hanging out doing this or hanging out doing that. What he saw was, hey, man, he get off that basketball court, get some rest, and go right back at it and go work out. And now as we see the quote unquote, and you're getting there, you see a lot of it, the AAU world. And when it comes to female athletes, there's something I think close, I want to say maybe 250,000 ACL surgeries a year, and females make up about 3/4 of that?
So we see a lot of ACL injuries in our female athletes specifically, or majority of those are going to be in the cutting and pivoting sports like soccer, in basketball. We see some in volleyball, but mainly basketball and soccer are going to be the sports that we see a lot of ACLs. So neuromuscular training is something that I specialized in my fellowship with Dr. Frank Noyes. He wrote a program, Sports Metrics, that you did the training for as well, of how to train these athletes, how to train these young ladies, how to land and cut in a proper form so that they can cut down on some of these ACL injuries, because it's devastating when you're dealing with 13 or 15-year-old young ladies and you're telling them, hey, your knee will never be the same. You're going to be out for a year. This surgery is going to set you back, 6 to 9 to 12 months before you even think about getting back to your sport. So there's not only from a physical standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint, that's a major impact on a young lady or a young male.
Tying a little bit of things together. So you're at Jackson State, and we all know, everyone knows, no secret, the big picture there a few years ago was none other than Prime Time himself. So through that, how has post Prime Time been since he's moved on to Colorado?
So as you can see, the show grows on. The female athletes are still playing really well. The male athletes football team had a great season last year and have a lot of recruits back, have a lot of players back. So they're going to continue to play at a high level. As you see, the Sonic Boom played in the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of attention on Jackson State University. Did he bring a lot of coverage to the school? Absolutely. But I think that the university, the athletic director, has done a great job. And also Coach T.C. Taylor has done a great job of keeping that program afloat. Last year, a lot of people left, but being able to do what he did in his first year of coaching, I thought was phenomenal. And they're reloaded this year. So be ready.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of being reloaded, I think you got my little cousin right there with you too, Miss Suzette.
As healthcare providers, we spend a large portion of our lives focused on our training as well as taking care of other individuals. But I'm calling a timeout because life can change in an instant. We know it's difficult to fathom that a sudden illness, injury, or death could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But that's where Dr. Stephanie Pearson and her unique team of advisors at Pearson Ravitz come into play. They focus on empowering physicians like yourself to protect your most valuable asset, your income, and life's most important people, your family. So go to PearsonRavitz.com to make sure that you are protected today.
How you doing tonight?
Good.
Well, that's wonderful. Speaking of JSU, you had an opportunity to go up on the university and take a look and see all that. What are your thoughts and feelings? You're a young basketball player coming up right now in the middle school side of the house, correct?
Yes, sir.
What school are you at right now?
Madison Mill.
How did you end up falling in love with basketball? I know you're looking at several sports and basketball became that. Was it just the opportunity just to be around it? And you just say, man, this is something I could do, or you just kind of naturally say, hey, I like this game?
So, before I played basketball, I just played everything that, I could do, but basketball was not my main priority. And then we started going to games, and at that time, the women weren't as good as they are now. And I would go to a lot of boys' games and stuff like that. And then, over the years, whenever Dad, before he came to JSU, I was like, maybe I want to do something with basketball. And maybe I want to focus on basketball more because I saw, how they can play it.
That's awesome. So what do you think about Coach Tamika Reed? Because she's had a great run, back-to-back Coach of the Year in the SWAC. As Dr. Derrick said, a lot of people, and this, Derrick, a lot of people was banking on JSU to drop. Tom Dion walked off the yard. Tommy walked off the yard. They act like he was taking the entire stadium and everything with him. But it was awesome to see what Coach Reed did on that. What did you guys think about that?
I'm very surprised that she could do it back-to-back. I know that she could do it. I know the team that she has. She's a phenomenal coach. And that summer, the summer that we first moved out here, we were in the house for a couple weeks. And Dad's like, hey, you want to go do this little camp that they have at JSU? I didn't really, I wanted to go, but I didn't want to go because I didn't know anybody. But, I went there and I just saw, how she coaches her girls and how, her girls was coaching us. And like I learned a lot, like how they're determined and stuff. And then like now I met people that were at that camp, and some of them people like I'm very close with. They're on my team. That now like, we have a good relationship with like the basketball side because we know how to communicate better, and we've learned from her. And I hope to go back.
That's really nice. So you end up saying, hey, this is something I like to do. Basketball is where I want to be at. Had an opportunity to get in the house, been up there. Dad took you to camp. There's a lot of stuff you can't do and all of that. And I want to make sure that I want to make sure everyone hear you. So I want you to speak up a little bit for me so they can make sure they hear you out here as well. But the question I want to ask you is that looking at basketball down the road, where would you like the opportunity of where your dad has the ability to make sure that you are being in a position to, one, make sure you got the right training, two, right nutrition, and three, making sure you are in the right position. Where would you like to see basketball in the future take you?
I would like to see basketball take me to like college because I feel like I play two sports now, and like, I feel like I could have a future with basketball and like seeing how people like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Fly J and Michaela Williams and all of them, how they're like going on and making a platform for themselves. I feel like if I continue and like doing hard work, I could like get myself to that.
Plus, you got me right here, and we talking about NIL money. We
Oh
talking
Lord.
about, come on now, we talking about NIL. Hey, there is no athlete, and Dad will tell you, there's no athlete in terms of signing scholarships that don't ask about the NIL anymore. And Caitlin Clark right here, she's putting on a show, 35 seconds left to go in the game. Iowa's up right now, 94-84, big time game. So, and that's good. So what position do you play right now, Suzette?
So basically, I can play mostly everything because of our teams, like the
Everything,
younger
okay.
team. But like I normally play forward and point guard.
Okay. Now, how tall are you?
I'm 5'7".
Ooh, well, you're growing right now. I can't wait to get in. So, well, listen, I thank you very much for joining the show tonight on the Pull Up Podcast Show, because I want everybody to know who you are before that name come up and they say, man, I remember on your show years ago, Coach. I want to make sure I introduce you to them right now. And Dr.Derrick, the question I got for you on that, speaking of the women's basketball right now, JSU, they gave it a big shot. The girls tried their best. Unfortunately, they lost by 22 points against UConn first round, having to play against the number one seed in the tournament. Obviously, we know who UConn is with Paige, and Becker, and she's back. She just came off of an ACL injury. We know that. And now she's returning to play. And then, like you said, it set her back a complete year. She had to miss a year of school right now. So do you think, looking at the SWAC, that you guys will have a team in the future that'll have a possible run that gets past the first round with a nice maybe a 115, a 215, or a 116 upset?
Yeah, I think that seeding is very important. If you look at Jackson State's preseason, pre-conference schedule, they played Texas, Oregon State, Kansas State, Miami, Mississippi State. They played like half of their teams were ranked in the top 25. And as you see, Oregon State just got put out, right? And
yes.
Texas as well. They played Texas. So
yep.
They did not mess around with their offseason schedule. And then they ran the whole conference in the SWAC play. So if you give them a different seed, if they're seeded 8 or 9, then watch out, right? So they went up and played UConn very tough. They got down early in the game, but if you look at quarters 2, 3, and 4, there was about a 5-point differential all the way through the game.
Right.
Those ladies know how to play ball, and they had depth and size. So I think as they continue to build and you continue to have more of a focus on not only women's sports, but also HBCU sports, I think you will see that playing field be more level over time.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of that, I look at it as your secondary home at HBCU and Howard University. And I'm very good friends with Coach Kenny Blakeney. Matter of fact, I'm working to get him on the show to talk a little bit about Howard at HU. And they have proven a point on the men's side, back-to-back appearances, played very well down to a 3-second game, 3 seconds on the clock in the game, 3 opportunities to make that big shot. the argument comes down sometimes is, do you think, I know they've got to fill at 64, and like football is going to now expand to that bigger roster to 12. So now they're talking about basketball possibly moving to 90. What do you think about that?
I don't
Yes.
know. That's a lot. At some point, you have to have a cutoff. I mean, as
Yeah.
far as travel, think about the fact that we had to leave Mississippi to go to Connecticut and play them in their home gym.
Yes.
Right. And the gym was packed, probably 10,000 people. You could tell from the announcements, they would call one JSU player and one UConn player, and the building would just erupt. So you give them home court advantage and have them a higher seed playing a lower seed.
And the referees.
So right now you have to level that really to get a good competition, I think. So I think the women's game, I think this is the first time I remember the tournament, the men's tournament and the women's tournament going on at the same time. It used to
They
be a
said
week
the
split
good
apart.
thing about it is last year, and Suzette, you're going to love this. And last year, 10 million people watched the LSU Iowa National Championship game. So this is how I drew it up, and it's coming because Val will tell you, for promotional purposes only, if you follow my rules, you may be able to pay a couple bills off. But you're looking at what I just explained today on the radio this afternoon. Iowa LSU, this rematch was going to be a huge, huge rematch because they were looking for one another. You got two superstars in Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. Now, I said that Iowa will move on, and I predicted they will move on by 7. They're up by 7 right now with 7 seconds on the clock. Then you're looking at Dawn Staley on the other side. I don't think NC State's going to be able to stick nowhere near South Carolina. No pun intended, but I think Dawn rolls on big time, maybe plus 15 there. But the team that no one's looking at is my girl, Juju Watkins, and that USC Trojan, who's getting ready, that game's getting ready to come on right now after Iowa. And you potentially right now, you may potentially for the first time have a number 1 and a number 1 seed on the women, and then a possible UConn Purdue number one on the men for the first time, and I can't tell you when. 2 number 1 seeds, men and women, meet up for the national championship game. And because they have now merged the games together so closely, you now got basically men and women on top of each other for almost a week as basketball is flowing out. That's a good.
It's a beautiful thing. And as you mentioned these names, these are people that Suzette's looking up to now. She knows, Juju, and she knows Jada, what's her name? Jada Williams, that plays for Arizona. So she is watching these girls and have seen them come from high school and make the jump immediately into the college ranks and be able to produce. So it's great for young aspiring women that are coming behind them, what they're doing in the game right now.
Oh, yeah, it's all. And Suzette, like you mentioned and Dad mentioned earlier, it's the getting up. I had a young man on the show a few weeks ago, and Cam out of Knoxville, and he literally stayed on half a show because he said, "Coach, I love you, man, but I got to go to bed."
Right.
But
he had to
it's
go do some
getting up,
homework.
scan those books, Suzette, doing the right thing, jumping that rope every day, put in those jump shots, shooting. You don't have to shoot 200 and 300, 400 at your age. But getting up 25, 30 shots right now, getting used to that repetition, start to build you a repetition of daily activities with basketball at least 3 to 4 times a week, and everything else will just kind of come on that. Because one day you may be sitting up here playing with this young lady right there, Miss Dawn Staley. Because if everything works out, I'm about to bring you up into Nashville with me and finish up your school up here with me. So that's how we do it. But listen, I want to thank you guys. Appreciate the time and opportunity. But before I let you go, I need to ask you 2 questions here. One, on the women's side of the house, Doc, and also Suzette, who do you guys have in the national championship game for the women?
For me, for that, I was sad, but we already know who won. It was Iowa. They're in the Final Four. And I'm ready to watch the USC game against UConn. But I feel like if Juju can do her thing, but you have Paige Buckner, that she's a phenomenal player. So it comes down to that last quarter, and then you'll figure out who's going to be going against Iowa.
Okay. And who do you got, Doc?
I'd say South Carolina until proven otherwise.
Okay, yeah. And on my side of the house, I got South Carolina and Iowa. I think Dawn Staley revenges that loss. Once again, that's going to be made for TV. You can put that on Netflix, HBO, Showtime, and Stars, because it's going to be ready to go. And what about the men's side of the house? What do y'all think on the men's side of the house? Who you think gonna finish up on the men?
So I'm going to go with, I laughed at my son when he filled out his bracket 2 weeks ago and he put North Carolina State to win it all, but he's smarter than he looks. So
Oh
North
my
Carolina
God.
State.
Look, I need a little Derrick on my show. He should have told me about that on FanDuel. I could have cleaned up by right now.
Yeah.
Man, and who you got on the men's side, Suzette? Who you like?
So I watch more girls than I watch boys, but I watched this last couple of days of it, and I think that NC State's gonna win it all because they have that big old guy that's gonna make them big old passes,
DJ.
and they're gonna get all them shots.
That's right. And I got Purdue pulling it out with
Of course
UConn.
you do. Big
And
Ten.
you know how that go. And we're going to talk about that as we come back. I want to thank the one and only Dr. Derrick Burgess and my little cousin, who y'all going to know about her in the future, Miss Suzette. Thank you guys for coming in, spending some time with the one and only Coach Tony on the Pull Up Podcast Show. Val, it's halftime, girl. Let's pay some bills. We'll be right back.
Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace.
Hey, time out with the sports doctor. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine